The rain had been steady all evening, thick sheets against the cabin roof, the kind of storm that made the world outside disappear. I had been sitting in silence for hours, staring into the fire, pretending I was warm in my hands, but really just trying not to think too hard about the reasons I was alone. My husband's voice still lingered in my mind, cold, distracted, always too busy with work. Weeks had stretched into months, the gap between us widening, and I had come here to this lakeside cabin hoping that space might give me clarity. Instead, it only gave me the echo of my own loneliness. It was late, long past the time when anyone would come knocking, when the sound of fist on would startle me out of my thoughts. A firm, deliberate knock, half lost in the thunder. I froze, unsure whether to answer. No one ever came this way uninvited. I let it sound again, 3 slow raps against the cabin door, before I finally stood and pulled it open. He stood there, drenched from head to toe. A young man, no more than 20 at most, with clothes clinging to his frame, plain, homespun fabric, the kind you only saw among the Amish. His hat was missing, his hair slicked to his forehead, and his eyes couldn't meet mine. He didn't say a word, just stood there, shivering under the rain as if he wasn't sure he had the right to step inside. I opened the door wider. "You'd better come in," I said. My voice was steady, but inside I was rattled. He moved past me cautiously, dripping onto the wooden floor, silent except for the sound of his wet boots. I closed the door, shut out the storm, and studied him in the flickering firelight. His shoulders hunched inward, his lips pressed tight, as though every word he might have said had been swallowed before it reached me. "Sit," I offered, motioning toward a chair near the hearth. He lowered himself without protest, still silent. I fetched a towel, draped it over his shoulders, and waited for him to speak. But he didn't. The fire popped, thunder rolled, and all I could hear was the sound of his uneven breaths. Finally, I asked, "What are you doing out here?" No answer, only the faintest shake of his head. For a moment, frustration welled up in me. I was already drowning in silence, in everything my marriage had become, and now here was another boy, mute, keeping his secrets. But then I looked at him again, the way his hands trembled against the towel, the way his gaze flicked nervously toward me and then darted away, and something softened in me. Whatever he had run from, whatever weight he carried, it was carved into his posture. He didn't need questions. He needed warmth. "Come on," I said gently. "You can't stay in those clothes." I rummaged in the dresser until I found a spare shirt and sweatpants. When I handed them to him, he froze. For a long moment, he didn't move, and then finally, wordlessly, he stood. His fingers lingered on the fabric, as if even taking something from me was a risk. I turned away, giving him privacy, though I couldn't help catching the sound of wet clothes peel from his skin, the whisper of fabric against flesh, the soft thud as each piece hit the floor. The firelight cast shifting shadows across the walls, and I could feel his presence behind me, closer now, warmer. When he finally sat again, dry but still tense, I noticed the way the shirt clung differently to him, the way his damp hair curled around his ears. He looked smaller somehow, vulnerable, like a boy pulled out of one world and thrust into another. I wanted to ask him everything. Why he was here, why he'd chosen this cabin, what he was running from. But I held my tongue. I'd learned in my own marriage that words could betray as much as they revealed. Sometimes silence said more. So we sat together, listening to the storm. His eyes lifted once, caught mine, and for a heartbeat, the air shifted. It wasn't spoken, but it was there, an energy sharp and fragile, as though either of us could shatter with the wrong move. I looked back at the fire, pretending I hadn't noticed, but my pulse betrayed me. I hadn't felt that stir of awareness in years, not since before Mark had drifted away. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was only pity, but deep down I knew better. The night stretched on. He pulled the towel tighter around his shoulders, his breathing steadying, his body thawing from the cold. Still silent, but no longer empty. His silence had become weighty, a presence of its own. I found myself wanting him to speak, to offer even a single word, but at the same time I dreaded it, because whatever words he gave me would only make this real and already in the quiet flicker of firelight. It was becoming something I couldn't name. The storm outside showed no sign of ending. Inside, the storm in me was only beginning. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle by the time the clock struck midnight, though the air inside the cabin felt anything but calm. The boy, Eli, he finally whispered when I asked for his name, sat wrapped in a towel, watching the fire as if it held answers. His voice had startled me when it came, low and hesitant, the kind of voice that carried weight simply because it had taken him so long to use it. He didn't offer more, just a name, as if even that was too much to surrender. We didn't speak much after. Words seemed fragile, unnecessary. But little by little, in pieces scattered like kindling, he began to let fragments slip. His family lived not far from here, he told me, but the world they lived in was closed, controlled. His words carried hesitation, as if saying them out loud was a kind of sin. They wouldn't understand, he murmured once, not looking at me. He didn't explain further, but I didn't need the details. I'd known enough of my own life to hear the truth hiding behind what wasn't said. I should have told him to go back, should have reminded myself that I had no right to be part of whatever he was running from. But instead, I found myself leaning into the silence, letting it pull me closer to him. Maybe it was a storm. Maybe it was a loneliness I had been drowning in for months. Maybe it was a simple fact that here at last was someone who needed me. I made him a cup of tea, my hand steady though my chest was not. He accepted it with both hands, holding it like a fragile treasure. Steam rose between us, blurring his features, casting him in the glow of the firelight. I couldn't look away. We sat together on the rug before the fire, the chairs behind us forgotten. At first there was space between us, respectful, careful, but space has a way of closing when neither person pushes back. My arm brushed his once, accidental, or maybe not. He didn't move away. Instead, his fingers twitched against his knee, as if fighting a war with themselves. I thought of Mark then, my husband, hundreds of miles away, probably asleep in our bed, without noticing I was gone. The ache of that memory made my throat tighten. I thought of the vows we had made, the life we had built, the quiet ways we had stopped showing up for each other. I thought of how far apart we had drifted, how invisible I had become. And then I looked at Eli, this stranger sitting in my cabin, his shoulder inches from mine, his breath uneven, his silence louder than thunder. I reached for more wood and tossed it onto fire. Sparks jumped, shadows leapt across the walls. In the shifting glow, I caught his eyes flicking to me, then away, then back again, as if he couldn't help it. My chest tightened. There was a question in his gaze, one he couldn't voice, one I shouldn't answer, but it was there, undeniable. The hours stretched, the storm dragging on. I offered him the bed, said I could take the couch, but he shook his head quickly, almost panicked. "No," he said, his second word of the night. "I'll stay here." He pulled the blanket closer, as if the floor by the fire was safer. Safer from what? I didn't know. From his world? From mine? Or maybe just from himself. I settled beside him, closer than before. The warmth of the fire was nothing compared to the warmth of his body so near mine. I could feel it, even without touching, a heat that drew me in like gravity. I tried to resist, telling myself it was wrong, that he was too young, that I was married, that I should be stronger than this. But my body betrayed me. My pulse raced, my breath quickened, and still I stayed, shoulder to shoulder with him, letting the silence speak. He broke it finally. His voice cracked as he said, "I couldn't stay there." That was all. No explanation, no details. Just those words, thick with pain and longing. I swallowed hard, every part of me understanding more than I wanted to. He wasn't talking about a place. He was talking about a life he couldn't live, a truth he couldn't name. I turned my head, and this time, when his eyes met mine, he didn't look away. For the first time, he held the gaze. His lips parted as if he might say something else, but nothing came. The firelight danced between us, the air charged, and I knew that whatever line we were standing on, we were about to cross it. I should have pulled away. I didn't. The fire had burned low, its glow softer now, shadows stretching long across the cabin walls. Eli sat beside me, his blanket slipping slightly from his shoulders, his breathing uneven. I could feel the storm between us, quieter than thunder, louder than silence, pulling us closer with every second that passed. My hand moved before I could stop it, brushing against his. Just the faintest touch. He didn't pull away. The smallest things become monumental when the world has told you never to feel them. The way his fingers twitched, the way his breath caught, the way his shoulder leaned just slightly toward mine. It was enough to undo me. I turned toward him fully, and he looked up, eyes wide, waiting. I knew what I was about to do. I knew what it meant. I thought of Mark again, my husband, of all the nights he had chosen distance over closeness, work over love. I thought of the man I had once believed would be my forever. The guilt pressed down hard, but not hard enough to stop me. I lifted my hand, cupped Eli's face, and for the first time, he didn't hide. His skin was warm, trembling under my touch. He let out a breath, shaky, almost a whimper, and leaned into me as if he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to allow it. That was all it took. My lips found his, tentative at first, then deeper when he pressed back. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only the heat of the fire, the storm now fading into quiet, the rhythm of two people finally giving into what had been simmering since the moment he stepped inside. We moved carefully, almost reverently, as if each touch might break us. Hands slid over fabric, finding warmth beneath. His grip tightened against me, kneading, desperate, silent. I should have stopped. Every vow, every promise I had ever made echoed in the back of my mind, telling me this was wrong. But the ache of being unwanted, unseen, had hollowed me out long ago. And here, in Eli's arms, I felt alive again, desired, needed. His silence said what words never could, that he was just as starved, just as lost, just as desperate to feel something real. Time blurred. The fire burned down to embers, our bodies pressed close, shadows wrapping us in secrecy. There was no shame in those moments, only a fragile kind of peace, like the world had granted us this one night to be who we really were. But peace never lasts. When it was over, Eli curled against me, his head resting lightly against my shoulder, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. I stared into the dying fire, my hand resting on his back, and the weight of what we'd done began to settle. I felt the warmth of him against me, but I also felt the cold edge of betrayal. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The room was quiet except for the softening of the rain outside. Then, suddenly, the shrill vibration of my phone shattered it. I froze. On the screen, Mark's name lit up, glowing in the darkness. My throat tightened. He was calling. Probably just to check in, maybe out of habit, maybe out of guilt. He didn't know. How could he? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My thumb hovered, then slid the call away, leaving only silence again. Eli stirred slightly at the sound, lifted his head to look at me. His eyes searched mine, questions unspoken but heavy in their weight. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. He knew as well as I did that when morning came, reality would return. I brushed his damp hair back from his forehead, fighting the ache in my chest. I didn't know if I had saved him tonight, or ruined him. Maybe both. He had shown up wet, silent, needing something he couldn't even name. And I had given in, offered what comfort I could, even if it meant betraying everything I thought I was. The fire sputtered out, leaving us in shadows. I closed my eyes, memorizing the weight of him against me, because I knew it couldn't last. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to return to his world or escape it, and I would have to decide how to face mine, with lies, with guilt, or with the haunting truth that for one night I had wanted something too much to let it go. The storm outside had ended, but inside, between Eli and me, it had only just begun.